You got your coffee?
I do.
You all set up? You ready to go?
Well as I'm going to be.
Got your comics?
Got them.
Let's talk.
Check.
Well, hey, Boo. Welcome back. It's another fun-filled episode of the Southern Pride Geekery podcast. As per usual, I am Caleb Alexander McKenzie.
Matt Trogdon.
And if I am not mistaken, this is episode 219, I think. I haven't pulled up my my list. I actually couldn't find my phone. I got so excited about the coffee that you made me this morning that I misplaced my phone, and now I couldn't find it.
Oh, I was about to say, that was a big question mark at the end of that.
It was, because actually it's 220.
220.
So we have reached 220. 220 episodes of this little thing that we do. For those of you who are longtime listeners, longtime friends, welcome back. We got a little something fun for you today, as usual. For those of you who are new, welcome. We're glad to have you. Hope you enjoy the next about an hour and a half of comics and comics related conversation that me and my friend Matt here do. Usually we have our brother Craig here with us, but as per the usual here lately, he is handling family business like a good person should, and he will not be joining us today. But he does send his salutations, greetings, I don't know what you call it. He sends his hellos out to everybody, and he will be back hopefully sooner rather than later. But we will carry on in his stead because that's what we do. This is a comics conversation show, so just before we talk about anything whatsoever, there's no real way to talk about comics, books, pop culture in a way that we can dissect them together without spoiling a few things. So inherent in everything, there's going to be spoilers, right? That's just the nature of the beast. So if you haven't read/watched anything that we're going to be talking about yet, hit the pause button and come back to it later after you've digested it, you've grabbed it, and you've committed it to your memory so you can involve yourself with the conversation, because that's what we want, right? We don't want to ruin the experience with anybody. I mean, You might, Matt.
I don't like spoiling things for people.
You're not a ruiner of experiences?
I don't dig on it.
You're not a happiness assassin?
No.
Okay, I believe you. You say that with trepidation in your voice and a glint in your eye.
No, I really don't. I'm just thinking of all the people that do like to do such things.
Yeah.
That really sticks in my craw, as we say around these parts.
Why are people like that?
Misery loves company.
I guess, yeah. Like I know for for something that we're going to talk about here later, like literally the debut night, like there were internet nerds just gleefully posting things, and I'm just like, why? Like, what do you get out of this? What?
They're sad little people.
Instant gratification of somebody else's disappointment? I don't know. I have no idea. But we're not like that. We keep things at least 50% positive around these parts. Not 100, because that's too much happy.
That's disingenuous.
Yeah, no, we can't do that. But we keep it fairly, on the right side of
absolutely
of the meter, so to speak. But how was your week, man?
Busy, as they have been, busy but constructive. It's exactly what a very practical, somewhat boring adult would ask for.
Yeah, it's good. As long as the meter is just kind of not just wiggling in the middle a little bit. Nope, same. School, work, life balance. Other corporate speak. We had a bit of a snowstorm this week here in the central Arkansas. Dude, I don't know about you, but I got like 4 inches at my house.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, they were calling for less than 1, and I was in the gym the whole time it was snowing. I came out, my car was covered.
Yeah.
I was like, okay.
That's fine. Yeah, no, so I walked in the gym, and it was, it was chilly outside. It was nipply, but it wasn't, snow weather. And then when I walked out, it was a full-blown blizzard. And I was like, what just happened?
Yeah.
Like, I wasn't in there that long. I was only in the gym for like 2.5 hours, but still, It was just like, whoa. But yeah, we got about 4 inches. And, for me and the work that I do with the van, whenever it snows or something like that at night, we try to open up emergency shelters and get people who live outside in. So I got to do that. Fingers crossed for the last time this season. Hopefully, knock on wood. Next year I'm sure will be different, but it's hard. It's hard on us. It's hard on the people that we help. It's hard on us. So my whole system's out of whack. I was talking to you this morning about it. Just like I feel like I'm walking with one eye open.
Yeah.
And like that eye is only 50% working. So
yeah, not a good feeling. Been there.
No,
was there earlier this week actually.
This lovely coffee you made is certainly perking me up.
Nice.
So, all right. Well, let's get to the funny books and talk about a few of them. Why don't you tell me what's on your short stack for the week? Give me 3 comics that you read that piqued your interest.
3 that I read piqued my interest. 1, Per the Norm from Ablaze. This is another number 1, The Sumerian. This one is The Hour of the Dragon. This one is written by Julian Blondell. The artist is Valentine Shearer. I guess is how that's pronounced. This is an interesting one. I am not familiar with this Hour of the Dragon story. Right. It's the only one they've done so far that I'm not. I guess I haven't read it.
Well, we were talking last week because we had seen that, and neither one of us, like, we were both familiar with the stuff that came out in some of the eerie stuff like that. But apparently, this was the only full length novel that he wrote.
Well, and this one was originally released in Weird Tales.
Okay.
As I read later, but yeah, for whatever reason, this particular Conan story doesn't stand out to me, or I just missed it completely to my great shame.
Well, I mean,
let's not dwell on it.
Hey, look at the bright side. You now have quote unquote new Howard to go seek out and read. That's got to be fun. Yeah,
totally. Also on my short stack from Marvel, this is part of the Devil's Reign storyline. This is a one-shot, Moon Knight. This one I think you're going to talk about later, but the writer on this is Jed McKay. Artist is Federico Sabatini. Colorist is Lee Lowridge. Letterer is Corey Pettit. And I'm just going to leave it at that because you're going to find out why this was on my short stack when Caleb talks about it. And then thirdly on my short stack is the new first issue self-contained Trigger Warnings Red Room by one Ed Piskor. Disgusting, compelling, violent, repulsive. I highly recommend it.
all things that makes Matt happy. I'm actually kind of surprised that's not your book of the week. I was kind of tentatively expecting it to be.
Thought about it.
Yeah, but it looks like with my little eye, I spy something over there that's going to be also fun to dive into. All right, so I got a little short stack, a little bit different than what you gave us, because we have a swath of books that we like, and with our personalities, we do, we tend to pick up on different things. I read, or I should say I continue to read, from DC Comics, Black Label, The Nice House on the Lake. This is a really cool, like, apocalyptic, but doesn't feel apocalyptic story about these friends who are brought to a containment house during the end of the world by a being that is not a human, comes to find out, and it is incredibly good. It's probably one of the best James Tynion stories that I've ever read, with art by Alvaro Martinez Bueno and Jordi Belair, the great Jordi Belair, doing the colors. Dude, it is so, like, for a book that has this broad scope, it really focuses on the connection between all of these people. It's I hate to make the allusion to Friends because I don't particularly like that show.
I just winced.
But it's like what happens when these people who have these long-standing relationships to each other are forced to come back together during adulthood, recognize and reckon with the fact that they have changed, while they're while they're being held hostage by an alien creature who wants to save them from the apocalypse that they caused. That's essentially it in a nutshell, right?
So a high school reunion with an alien,
right? And mass death,
terrifying,
global catastrophe. But they can make lists and get anything they want. It's like Amazon Prime in the apocalypse. It's great.
Okay, silver lining.
Yeah, the aliens. He's a benevolent god, if nothing else. Second on my short stack is a book from Dark Horse Comics that I think I spoke about the first one a little bit, but the creative team on this is why I picked this up and why why I'll pick up most things with these folks on it. But the book is called Manor Black, and this is actually the second volume or chapter of the story. It's called Fire in the Blood. It's written by Cullen Bunn, co-written by Brian Hurt, with lines by Brian Hurt, and then colors and letters by Tyler Crook. So it's almost this little, murderer's row who's who of Cullen Bunn artists who've worked on stuff with him. And you're getting a little bit of history to the Black family, these fire mages, and tying it into similarly to what they have done with Harrow County. You've got this, Caucasian family with a lot of history, but with a lot of history comes a lot of secrets. And so you've got these African-American individuals who have, been part of this legacy, who are actually way more part of it than what you knew at first. and so you're diving into some of this, arguably Jeffersonian history with these Southern families, like these Southern powerful families and their magics. So I love it. It's great. And in this, you get some of the mechanics of how this power is passed down. It's super fun stuff. And then last but not least, from Image Comics, this is actually the book that I thought I was going to be talking about as my book of the week this week. But to its credit, to its deficit, I don't know which yet. Not enough in it happened to really give me enough to like meat to discuss. But that book is called Little Monsters, and it's a new story by Jeff Lemire and his longtime compatriot in comics, Dustin Nguyen. And this is yet again a post-apocalyptic story, but it features vampires. So it is these kids who have been turned to vampires. You learn somewhere in the story by an elder, and you don't know what, but they've been kind of kicking it after the end of the world, feeding off of vermin and stuff to keep them alive. And they're just kind of bored. Now these are like they play hide and seek, they sit around and write songs. That so it's kind of this. What do kids do at the end of the world, and what are these kids' relationships like together, with the context that they're vampires and that they're dealing with the end of the world, and they have to spend eternity trying to figure out what to do. It's fun, but again, it's more, the first issue is more of a let's get the gang together and tell you who these people are and just give you enough to hang on to so you start to figure out their personalities. But you don't get a lot of action and until like the last 3 pages of the story, when these folks who thought they were alone realize they're not alone. And so the second issue I think is going to pick up. I didn't dislike the first issue. I know it sounds like I was kind of lukewarm on it. I love it. I think this is going to be an incredibly cool story. As I've said before, it is borderline impossible for me to be objective when it comes to a Jeff Lemire story. That dude has just elevated himself on my hierarchy of entertainers, that it's just like I'm going to unfairly elevate whatever he writes. And I know that about myself, and I can be honest about that, right? So I can keep that in my back pocket. But it's a really cool story. I heard our buddy Jason Wood kind of said it has a Stand By Me vibe to it, which is interesting. I don't know that I would have made that connection, but after he said it, it kind of colored my my interpretation of the book, and I completely see that.
Sounds like it should have been your book of the week.
I'm going a little long, right? You're right. I'll slap my hand down. So that's Matt's. See, Matt is like my personal throttle. He keeps me.
I couldn't help myself.
No, you're right. You're right. And it's probably because you're really wanting to get to the next part, right?
There's that no lies detected.
All right,
that's what the kids say.
Detected. I see what you did there. Well, so you mentioned the word detected. Who would you say is the world's maybe greatest detective?
Hot take. My personal opinion.
Okay.
I believe it's the Batman, one Bruce Wayne.
Oh, and what was the one Bruce Wayne, world's greatest detective? I've been seeing his name fly around a lot lately. Why is that?
Well, the context I would associate it with is the new Batman movie.
The feature film.
Yeah, the feature film, you may say, a talkie even.
That's right. So as we said last week, we gave you a little bit of warning. Instead of roundtabling a comic this week, we are going to roundtable a film that we both saw. So, heavy spoilers. Go see it if you haven't yet. Totally understand if you don't stick around for the rest of the episode for a little bit, but do yourself a favor. It's just 30,000 foot view. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think it's great.
Same.
So do yourself a solid. Go see it. It's worth the price of admission, and then come back and listen to it because we're gonna kind of dig into it. So Matt, you really enjoyed this film, right?
Mm-hmm.
What? Before we just talk about the plot, and I figure that's the way we should do this. Like, let's talk about the plot first, and then we'll talk about the characterization, tone, and some of that. We'll kind of break down the mechanics of the story. But what was one of your favorite aspects about the film? Just to kind of get us warmed up and going.
Favorite aspects about the film? Man, there's so much, but... Man, if I really have to nail it down to one thing, I think the overall craft in telling this particular story, I think I have to put that just slightly above everything else, because DC's been struggling
Yeah.
for a minute to tell a good story on screen.
Yep, that's fair.
And this was a very well told story on screen. Excellent execution in the craft of storytelling.
I think similar in tone, what I enjoyed the most about this story is just how they left you with the feeling that Gotham never slows down for a second. And that how busy a figure like Batman would be. Like he's following, and in this particular story, everything kind of, number one, because it's a movie and everything has to be attached and all comes back to culminate into one ongoing connected thing. But also because it just shows you he's dealing with he's juggling 4 different balls, so to speak. 4 or 5. And he has all of these things happening. There's a serial killer running around. There's mobsters being mobsters. There's the underground. There's saving your average Joe walking down the street that he has to contend with of every second that he's supposed to be protecting Gotham. And it just shows you how busy and how relentless that city is. And would be for a character like Batman. And I thought that was really cool because it's not just here's the hero, here's the problem, here's the, point A to point B and be done. Like I spent half the movie trying to figure out, okay, so which direction is he going to go in? Like how is this connected, or is it going to connect, or is this just something? And it was just like, oh, okay, like yeah, no, this dude doesn't get to rest.
Yeah.
This is not like Metropolis where everything is handled and everybody, it's Superman. He can't be in everywhere at once. So that's what I thought was really cool about it. It just goes to show you just how decrepit the city can be and how hard he has to go at it constantly, just full bore, which explains a lot about his personality. So, ready to dig into it?
Yep.
All right. So the story opens up, and I'm going to get you to help me with some of this. So, like, if I go off in a different or don't mention something, you just let me know and we'll walk down that. But the story opens up with Bruce Wayne is essentially in his second year of being Batman, right? So people have caught on that there is a Batman in the city. They're not really sure exactly what this is, what's happening. He's doing big things. He's doing small things. He really is kind of like a wraith, a vigilante who's running around the city. And he's in this mode where he is being the hero. To me, it felt like he hasn't quite figured out. He hasn't solidified his direction yet. Like he's still trying to get everything hammered down at who he is, who Bruce Wayne is, who and I say he, I'm always going to default to Batman being the first personality there. But who Bruce Wayne is, what his relationships are like, what his faux relationships are like. He's still trying to work all that out because it's very early on in his vigilantism. But he's doing his thing, and he is still at the point where he's shut off from most people. He's very individualistic, very, making by his own rules, not connected with anybody. And, he's doing what he needs to do to fight crime in the city, to be this force of vengeance, obviously based on the fact that he lost his parents. They don't change anything with that. But you don't see a lot of his parents in this film, except for you see more of the legacy that they left behind. In Gotham, like you might imagine, the underground is seedy. There have been recent busts, big happenings in the criminal world. The Marconi mob family plays a big role in this behind the scenes because they recently got shut down. They were recently, I'm going to use the word victims here because to be fair, they were double crossed of a giant drug bust, and it got them locked up and shut down. The Falcone crime family stepped in to make waves and has filled the power vacuum, so to speak. So you have a lot of moving and shaking going on with that. You have a serial killer who is starting to gain some traction, starting to get some attentions, leaving social media messages around, and he's going by the name of the Riddler. Or at least that's the moniker that the public I can't remember. Did he give himself that name? Or
he does.
Okay, yeah. So, and he's leaving messages for the Batman. And so, like I said, the Bat is spinning his wheels all over the place. And he's starting to put 2 and 2 together because, I don't know about you, and I have a feeling that this is probably true, but I felt like this was the best film that we've seen of Batman being a detective, right? Like, so his crime, him putting 2 and 2 together, pulling all of these strings, seeing how they overlap and attach, and even just crime scene investigation, start to really culminate in this. And he does some real good detective work. And this all kind of launch pads from the fact that the mayor of the city, who is in a very contentious election run, is murdered. And again, like I said, spoiler warning for those of you need to go see this movie, but he is murdered brutally in his apartment. Don't really know by who yet, but they have their clues. Gets found by his son. Obviously, this brings back a lot of memories for Batman. And so he from that crime scene, he starts to branch out and starts to follow a bunch of leads that lead him down a bunch of different paths. One of those paths that he walks down leads him to the Iceberg Lounge. It's supposed to be that, like, and the subculture in the Iceberg Lounge is 44 Below, which is just a haven for corruptibility, right? Like, it's just the place where, I mean, the Iceberg Lounge, if you followed comics, you know that it is helmed by one Oswald Cobblepot, the Penguin. He's a gangster. He's a money launderer. In this, he's not high level yet. He's working himself up the totem pole, so to speak. Very much involved with these upper echelon of gangsters, the Marconis, the Falconis, everybody, the people who are the movers and shakers in the city who are doing things that they weren't supposed to be doing, and bribable, and giving them a place to come and meet. And so it leads him there, which introduces him to a whole new problem. And that whole new problem is centered and figured around this young girl who is, she's an immigrant. She's here, she was working at the Iceberg Lounge because there wasn't anything else for her to do, trying to make ends meet. And her passport has been taken and has been sequestered away for leverage. But it turns out that this woman was a friend, an acquaintance, a roommate, maybe something more. I think it alludes to the fact that it was something more, but they never really go into it, of a individual named Selena Kyle. Selena is a very ambulatory, flexible young woman who maybe is a thief, is definitely a thief, but has not made enough waves, but is also like a dog with a bone. And since her friend has gone missing, she has taken upon herself to do her own investigation. And it leads her and Batman to the same place where they meet. And, you can see the sparks kind of fly, as any sparks would fly when you find very sexually attractive people clad in tight clothes, leather, and rippling muscles, on both ends, I should say. From there, they hesitantly team up, right? Because they're still not sure about each other, to start tracking all of these things down. And where they come to is a web of corruptibility. Now, they're not the only ones who have noticed this web of corruptibility. All of Gotham's would-be saviors, their would-be leaders, the people who are supposed to make the right decisions, and we always wonder, well, shit, man, why can't Batman get any traction in this city? Dude's fighting crime constantly, but not making any waves. It just seems like he's always getting, the waves of crime are crashing down around him, but he's only one man. Well, part of that is because the minority in Gotham are good people, it seems like, who are in power. All of your inner politics, your cops, DAs, all of these people are just corrupt to the core, or they've people have gotten leverage on them and been able to break them, and they're just not doing good things. They're not elevating the city to the point that they think that they should be, which makes them malleable. It makes them pawns.
Compromised.
Yeah, it compromises them. It makes them pawns in the games of these other characters. That's why Bruce Wayne can't make any headway in his city. It's because everyone around him bends or they break where he even refuses to bend, right? So that's what they start to figure out. But they're not the only ones. The Riddler, this becomes part and parcel of what motivates this Riddler as a character. Now, if you are familiar with the Riddler from, let's just say the comics, this is a little bit of a different take on him. Not so separated that there's no connection, because there certainly is. He's very clever. He's very sadistic. You know what? I will say the sadism of this character in the film didn't feel like most of what I've read from the comics. Like, this guy was more like, the comics Riddler, his victims are just kind of collateral damage. for his games where this version of the Riddler just kind of reveled in death. It seemed like at certain points he was like, no, I'm going to kill you. This is going to hurt. And I'm going to prove my point this way. So that was a little bit different. Definitely not what you should expect if maybe your only connection to the Riddler, which I don't think it would be if you're listening to this show, but if your only connection to the Riddler is Jim Carrey, then it's not that. Oh God. So very different. But he is a product of this Gotham environment, you might say. The Riddler is. He was orphaned at a very young age, and you will, as you watch the film, you will realize that being orphaned, and I'm using that word in quotes, it's used quite often in the film, is an ongoing thread, not only for the Riddler, obviously for Bruce Wayne, Selena Kyle. All of these are kind of the bastard children of Gotham, right? So it directs it in that way, but they all have incredibly different experiences that has led them down different paths, but brought them back together. Thomas Wayne, at one point, set up a fund. He said he used part of his wealth and money to start up not only this orphanage, but to start up this campaign, which is going to help all of the misbegotten children and downtrodden people of Gotham. Again, everyone in the city apparently is corruptible or find their way to wedge into non-corruptible situations. That thing is what brought them here, because you have crime families who have used that to launder money, use that to their own ends, and the Riddler sees that as the source of his own kind of personal victimization. And so he needs to, or he is compelled to, I should say, track that down and bring all of the lies, all of the, everything that's been swept under the rug. He wants to bring that out into the light and just bring the whole system crashing down. He's an agent of chaos. He doesn't really care what happens afterwards. He just wants to show the hypocrisy of the city and the hypocrisy of this upper echelon of society. It's almost a populist movement. Early on, he seems to take a tone of really fighting these kind of like pseudo patriarchal notions. By the end of the film, he's turned into, I don't know, he's probably someone who watches Tucker Carlson and touches himself. I don't really know, but he seems to have this like internet thread of like white supremacist dudes who are, gun crazed assholes who want to break down society. So he goes from like one end of the spectrum to the other. And it really, to me, the way I interpreted it was, nothing is sacred, but everything is fair game. And so he latches on to anything he can just because he's an agent of chaos. And Bruce has to stop that. Like, Bruce has to stop him from destroying the whole city, because as any good supervillain is wont to do, all of this boils down to and funnels into a place where he is going to wash Gotham off the map. And Batman has to fix it very early on in his career. He has to stop it while being targeted and while the people in his life are being targeted. You don't know if it's because there's a thread throughout this film. You feel like the Riddler knows who Batman is. You think that he knows he's Bruce Wayne, and you start to see all these Wayne figures being targeted, and then you see all these Batman figures to be targeted. It's very overlapped, and so he has to contend with all of this while trying to keep everyone alive and learning some valuable life lessons. Because where would we be without the moralisms of a Batman tale? And that's kind of where I'll stop for now, mainly because I need to drink a coffee and I'm out of breath. But kind of pick up on that. Let's talk into some of those things that I know that you are very intrigued and compelled by.
So, where would you like to begin?
Wherever you want to, Boo. I'm following you down this hole.
So, the thing about the take, I'll just start top of mind, is just this take on the Riddler. Mm-hmm. This is modeled after a true life serial killer. Okay. Called the Zodiac Killer.
You were telling me a little bit about this.
Even uses the same language the Zodiac Killer used in his letters and in his videos, like quotes, frankly. The Zodiac Killer used ciphers that he sent to the media. The Zodiac Killer also used greeting cards. So, I mean, this is a direct, representation of that person. Yeah. Wore a mask. I mean, this was a comic book villain in real life.
Now, and when you say the greeting cards, you're alluding to basically the riddles and the love letters that he left Batman.
For the Batman,
to his, in all of his traps.
Yeah. What the Zodiac Killer did is he left them to a specific police officer.
Okay.
That was his Batman. So it was eerie, watching all this happen, because you're like, this happened in real life. What this guy did, this is not a stretch, frankly, because it happened in real life. All these ciphers and teasing the media and teasing a authority figure. And, I don't see him as an agent of chaos, because, I mean, he's an agent of vengeance. And that was something that was spelled out in the movie. Is Batman goes on this mission of vengeance, and the Riddler was inspired by that. Mm-hmm. And this is the Riddler's version of vengeance. That's why he thought the Batman would want to join him and watch all this take place in Arkham. Yeah. Because he completely misread the Batman's MO. And of course, that concept, I've always really liked the concept that Batman is good, but also just as bad for Gotham City, and just how hopeless the feeling of Gotham City is. Yeah. This movie did a great, maybe the best yet, representation of Gotham City itself feeling hopelessly dangerous. Yeah. Whether you're dangerous on the street, dangerous as, a member of the public service, it just feels like it is hopelessly dangerous and hopelessly desperate. And that's why Bruce Wayne does what he does, is out of complete desperation. That's why Jim Gordon tolerates and coordinates with a vigilante out of complete desperation and a complete feeling of powerlessness to the system. I feel like this movie did a better job than any of the others at really representing that. Gotham feels like an absolute miserable place to be.
Well, and it's funny that you mentioned, not funny. No, I completely agree. One of our friends, Bill Zanowitz, made the comment that Gotham feels like a character in this film. Like
100%.
Yeah, Gotham is its own character,
which is definitely a key part of the Batman mythos. Right. Otherwise, if you don't really drive that, you don't grasp the full weight of why Batman does what he does. Yeah. And this movie did a great job of that. I mean, his motivation is to go out there and put the fear of God into criminals. And they did a great job of spelling that out at the beginning. I mean, every time that guy rips off the bodega, and he's looking at every shadow, and he's paranoid, and it gives him pause. Of course, it's by a car as a result. So it's like, what's that guy going to learn from this? Like, give him second thought next time he robs a place, because, he was almost killed. So it did a great job of representing that. Batman's not making a difference because he's beating up individuals. The difference he's making is the psychological waves of that.
It has a tangential effect, even when he can't even when it's not active.
Yeah. It's going to give criminals pause to what they're doing and make them stop and think for a second before, they're just not operating by their own free will with very little to fear. Yeah. So, the Riddler was interesting in this movie. I like the Riddler character. I've always wanted more Riddler stories. We know why people don't do them, because they're hard. Yeah. Because you got to come up with good riddles. So the Riddler's not represented just a whole lot as far as Batman's villains go for that reason. So I was really glad he was in this movie to that end. It was a much darker take on the character. There's no doubt about it. But, the whole movie's theme of just hopeless, grim, dark, it fit in with that. Mm-hmm. And again, it really, to me, it didn't feel out of place within the mythos itself.
No, and the dark, grim, and gritty does not. That has never felt out of place to me in a Batman movie, right? Like because Batman, Batman can be a little more lighthearted. I mean, you've got you've got the Adam West Batman stuff. Obviously there's other versions of it that are, but Batman is. I mean, his whole thing is he's a dark and broody, curmudgeonly character.
Well, that's true, but anybody having an issue with Batman being that character, yeah, that's somewhat silly to me. But it is justifiable to have a hang up with the Riddler being that character.
No, that is true. Where I was going to say is my problem becomes when DC takes that tone throughout the entire line, and you start to see that in Superman films, you see that in Wonder Woman films and everything else, because it shouldn't be.
Correct.
And I actually think in this film it did a really good job. I would say it did one of the better jobs, even since the last trilogy, of taking the grim dark of it all, and in the last like 10 to 15 minutes showing you actual hope, like elevating that, because in the last 15 minutes of this film, there is one of the most hopeful, wonderful, uplifting Batman moments where he's just doing these, it is reminiscent of scenes from like Hurricane Katrina, where just average people were staying in these desolate, broken places to save people. And they were risking life and limb to get people out of rubble and off roofs of houses and stuff. And that to me is the hopeful side of Batman, where it's not just it showed that bright side of the coin. And I thought that was a really, really well done part of it, where you in the last 15 minutes you get an equivalent from the last like 2 hours and 45 minutes of the movie.
Yeah, I mean it did. It really, of course, this is what's so brilliant about setting the tone in year 2. Mm-hmm. So he's still learning.
Yeah.
I mean, because Batman screws up a lot in this movie.
Yeah.
So, it's interesting that, we're not in year 1. He's not that green. He's in year 2, and he's been around a year. So the waves of his presence have been felt. The effects of his presence are in motion, the Riddler. But by the end of the movie, he realizes, okay, I got to be a little bit more than just someone who beats the hell out of criminals at random in the street, because the citizens were afraid of him.
Yeah.
And that's not going to help. That's not going to improve. That's not going to, help him meet his end if citizens are afraid of him. And he realizes that at the end of the movie.
Well, and he begins to realize that actually at the first movie too, when there are these like face painted semi-clown thugs who follow an Asian individual off of a train, which, with what's happened in the last few years, the increase of attacks on AAPI people in real life, I thought that was a very, I don't know if that is meant to be translatable to that, but I thought that was very timely. But these thugs have chased this individual off, and they're going to mug him, beat him up. It's almost an initiation to the gang. And it's another one of those situations where like people are like looking in every shadow to see if the bad is coming out. And even those thugs don't know what to make. They like... Batman to me is almost seen as like a wraith-like figure. No one really knows what or who he is. He's almost like the boogeyman, because when Batman actually does step out of the shadows and like goes to save this guy, the lead, I'm just going to call him a clown. The lead clown says, "Who the fuck are you?" Like he's almost shocked to see a real live flesh and blood person standing before him. And then he's less like, he proceeds to get his ass handed to him. All of them do. But there, for that moment, he is just like, oh, okay, you're not really Batman, because Batman is, something else. You're just a dude. Like Batman's more than just a person, so this can't be you. But then after he proceeds to sweep the floor with these dudes, the guy that he saved runs away screaming. He's freaked out, and so you see that seed very early on. And that
but Batman, I mean, he doesn't care at the time. He just looks at him.
Yeah,
he doesn't realize that doesn't help him yet.
No, that was more for audience edification. Like, okay, now you see what he's doing. This is going to be where he has to get to, and this is the problem he's got to fix.
Yeah.
So I thought that was very early on a good way to set the tone and the pace of the film, and to plant some seeds of expectation on where we're going with this.
Yeah.
And again, I loved that those bad guys, those street thugs, didn't know what to make of Batman.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, okay, like this is Dave McKean right here. Like this is that Arkham Asylum where he's not really a man, he's a force of nature, and that's what they expect out of it. So I thought
that's interesting, because I saw the opposite. Because he walks up, they're not taking him seriously. The guy's like, "What are you supposed to be?"
Well, yeah, the citizens' expectation of Batman did not meet the reality of what Batman is.
His mythos hadn't been. It's early in the game.
Yeah.
I mean, his myth. I mean,
everything is malleable.
Yeah, he's an urban legend, and not enough people have seen what he can do yet. So they're not afraid of him.
Yeah.
Type, so yeah, that was a really great scene. I really like, going back to the Riddler, I really like that he was a young man, very non-threatening appearance. Mm-hmm. Once you strip him down, you never give him a second look on the street. again, right out of reality when it comes to people that do these kind of crimes. So that was really cool.
Paul Dano was a good choice for this.
Oh, excellent.
Like, dude plays crazy real well.
Yeah. Yeah. The overall detective story, I really appreciated studying crime scene, going back to the Batcave, studying crime scene. Those little touches, we've been missing that for a long time.
I thought there were some great nods to the video game with him using his technology and equipment to like put things together as a detective that is not available to like the police.
Yeah,
I thought that was and to that end, I think this movie did a really, really good job of wearing its influences on its sleeves in a really cool way, in a way that doesn't feel derivative, but it just lets you know, like, here's the building blocks, here's what the DNA of this is.
Yeah.
All together, including the video games.
The video games are brilliant.
Oh, they are.
They are brilliant.
I love them. They're one of the few video games that can get me to sit still and actually play a video game, and I don't do that very often.
Yeah. The as far as Robert Pattinson's portrayal, it's interesting. I liked it. That's not me being passive aggressive. It was legit interesting how very slow and methodical his movements are when he's not engaged in violence. That was really interesting to me. He's the first time we see him, he's just very slowly walking into the light of the subway station to confront those thugs. And until he's provoked to violence, that's his whole demeanor. Very slow, very methodical, very cold. I thought that was really interesting. So how he'll, how this character is going to evolve going forward in the other two films, because this is going to be a trilogy, is what I read the other day. It's going to be really interesting, as we see him mature as an individual. But the very cold, calculating way that he interacts with people was fascinating to me. And it also speaks to his, I'm going to use the word immaturity as Batman.
No, I think that's a great way to put it.
Yeah. So once he realizes he's got to become a little bit more human, frankly, and not such a robot, that kind of stuff is going to be interesting. This has the feeling to me, like what we're probably going to do more than anything else as these movies progress is go back and compare one to the other to see how the Batman has changed.
Well, as we did with the my brain just went, the last trilogy, the Nolan trilogy. We did that between the first and second one, not the third one.
But I don't feel like the Batman character evolved. The Batman character was pretty much the same character throughout the three movies.
The world around him kind of evolved, maybe.
I just felt like what I felt. I still say the second, the Dark Knight, the second in the trilogy, that's still my favorite Batman movie to date. And this one could not be a closer second. That second Dark Knight movie I've rewatched countless times. But again, once Batman, once Bruce Wayne, becomes Batman, his character just didn't evolve. He learned some new things, but like this feels like we're going to watch a character evolvement with this one. This one feels different. I may be wrong.
That's fair.
But that's what it leads you to, even, based on specifically the way the movie ends, it sets up that expectation even more. So it's just going to be, it's really interesting how Batman and Bruce Wayne, when you see him at Wayne Tower, when he's not on the streets.
Yeah.
How he's interacting with the reporters. I mean, he's still the downtrodden, quiet. So how's he going to open up when he realizes he's got to play? Because like he says, I've got to be more. Well, how's that going to translate to being more as Bruce Wayne?
Yep. And what his responsibility to the city is. And that's one of the things that he learns is, like, not only do I have to be responsible for this city, because he almost sets Bruce Wayne aside in this film at the beginning of it. And he's like, my responsibility to this city is to be Batman, is to be vengeance.
What I'm doing in the streets, my legacy.
And then by the end of it, he's learned about his dad, what he's gleaned from his father's legacy and the misinterpretation of that legacy and the vulnerability of that legacy. I think by the end of it, he does realize that part of his responsibility is as Bruce Wayne.
Yeah.
And he has to make certain moves. like what you're saying, it's funny because it connects a few dots in my own as we're talking about this. I felt like I was watching a guy who was wearing a shirt that was one size too small. And you ever see a guy who's like, uncomfortable in his own clothes, and he's just like, the way he moves is kind of weird and guarded. Like that was what Pattinson's Bruce Wayne felt like to me. And I interpreted it as, oh, okay, this is because this is his mask, right? Like this is not who he is.
Yeah.
And then like what you're saying, it completely contextualizes a lot of that for me because he's working on, again, it's what I was saying at the beginning of the film. He's trying to figure out who he is because he doesn't know.
Well, he knows he's Batman.
Well, yeah, but again, what is so? But what we just talked about, like what is Batman? Because like the Batman from the first shot is not the same Batman has learned lessons, and has changed kind of direction, not completely. Like his true north is still in the same spot, but he's just realized that maybe he was going in the wrong angle to get there, and so he's still figuring everything out. Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm curious, specifically for you, because we have a book that we talked about not too long ago. What did you think about his relationship with Alfred as presented in this film?
Well, it really feel like they didn't get into his relationship with Alfred. I mean, that was barely even touched upon. He was colder to Alfred than usually what we see. But I think in the context of this story, that is frankly the way it should have been. That's something he's got to learn. And, he does when Alfred is laid up in the hospital. The reality of what he came close to losing hits him. So
and who he is. Obviously the father figure there. And the reason I thought about that is because, a few months ago, we read the Jeff Lemire book, the Robin and Batman. And one of the things you didn't like about that book, and totally fair, was the confrontation and the combativeness between Alfred and Bruce Wayne. Like, Bruce talks to Alfred some kind of way in that book.
He talks down to him. Confrontation between the two is what you need in that story. But Batman doesn't talk down to Alfred.
See, I felt like in the film, in the first part of the film where they have that kind of interaction, I did feel like this was a Batman who would talk down to him because he's kind of like putting the butler back in his place. Like you're getting too fresh and too familiar. By the end of it, I don't think he would. So that's just why. That's why I wanted to know what your thoughts on that were.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I didn't it didn't feel like he was talking down to Alfred. He just didn't appreciate him quite as much as he should yet. Yeah. Is the way it felt. It felt like somewhat contentious family relationship.
You're not my real dad.
Yeah.
This was a petulant child.
Something like that. Yeah.
I was just curious about that.
Yeah.
So earlier you said that it kind of, there was allusions to the Zodiac killer in the film. As I was watching this, within the first 30 minutes, I thought, oh, like this person is in love with David Fincher, who wrote and directed Zodiac, wrote and directed Seven. Yeah. Like there was so much of David Fincher. And getting back to something I said earlier, this is not a film that steps away and shies away from really showing you and reveling in its influences. It is a detective noir film. Like it's not just shaded with detective noir. It is straight up a detective noir film, even down to like the words and the cadences of some of the dialogue, especially between Selena, who by the way is not Catwoman in this. She's Selena Kyle. They don't call her Catwoman at all in this. She is Catwoman, but she's not there yet. But the way that they talk feels very reminiscent of a Raymond Chandler film. It feels very reminiscent of a Humphrey Bogart moment. Yeah. And I really loved that. Roger thought it was like, he was like, oh, it feels clunky in some ways, the way that they're talking, like the whole where she keeps calling him vengeance thing, which to be fair, I think that worked better on paper than it did in the film. That was one of the moments I was like, that worked once, don't do it again. But she keeps calling him, Selena keeps calling Bruce vengeance as a moniker and a nickname. That one didn't win me over, but
see, I felt like that was a character device that she was using. Like that was like, hey, come on, vengeance. Yeah. That felt like that was like her rubbing it in his face, like, what do you call yourself?
Right. No, and I think that yes, it was. I get that. It reminded me too of some of those moments where the not the damsel in distress, but the femme fatale has a name for the would-be detective that she keeps calling him, almost like a backhanded compliment, like kind of what you're saying. And I think just doing it as vengeance worked better, maybe in the script than it did in delivery. But I still love that they harken back to that, especially when you consider how much the Falcones played as not only just characters, but as a device in this. Because it reminded me, to me, it brings up the Maltese Falcon, right? Like, as somebody who loves these kind of detective noir books, I'm like, oh, of course they're using the Falcones as the Maltese Falcon in this, because it brings up the history of Bruce's father. It brings up the history of Selena's family, and it kind of unites them. And it literally, at the end of the day, it's not the point, but it contextualizes and gives texture to the entire story. That it was just like, oh, I was just clapping. I was like, hey, this is so celebratory of noir detective fiction, and it's not just hinting at it, but it is reveling in it. And I just thought that was great. The car chase reminded me a lot of like a Robert Rodriguez Grindhouse moment. I thought that was really cool. The video game elements of it, I thought was wonderful.
Yeah, the Batmobile car chase scene was amazing.
And some of those scenes were taken, like the way that it was shown, were taken from the second Nolan film. Like when the Joker is driving with his head out the window and laughing. Like, I think there were moments in that which were meant to evoke that. It was meant to bring you back as the watcher, as the viewer, to those moments and just revel in how good those moments were. I love something that uses his influences well, where it does not feel derivative. It feels like it capitalizes on those moments and just reminds you, this is why you love this stuff.
Yeah,
this is why you're a pop culture fan.
Yeah, man. Making a Batman movie, you've got to have a great Batmobile car chase scene. Is this what it comes down to in today's world? Yeah. It's just, you've got to. And, the level keeps ratcheting up every time we get a new Batman movie. The Batmobile scenes are just, it's got to be really challenging as a director to come up with one, because you're gonna have to outdo the previous, or at least do as well in a different way. The car chase scene in The Dark Knight that we got is still one of my favorite things ever, when the Joker is attacking Harvey Dent's armored vehicle as he's being led downtown. That's still one of my favorite things ever. Of course, then it evolves into the Bat Pod chase scene, which is just amazing, still amazing. So I don't envy a director that goes into a Batman movie thinking, Jesus Christ, how am I going to keep up with all these?
Can I make a bad nerd confession? I absolutely hate the crawler that turned into the Batmobile in the Nolan movies. The puddle jumper. I don't know. Like, I hated that. I didn't love. I mean,
as far as like Batmobiles itself,
I hated it. I hated it so much.
When the first saw it, I was like, okay, yeah, I was okay with it, but what Nolan did with it in Dark Knight was incredible.
He used it well. I will say he used it well. But I love in this movie they get back to, no, this dude has a muscle car with a badass motor.
Nothing fancy. Yeah. It's just a car with a rocket engine on it. And
the Bat Cycle was cool in this. The motorcycle that he used was great. And those are some of my favorite moments where Batman and Selena are riding the bikes together. Like, I love that moment.
Well, and it was interesting as well as how few gadgets Batman had in this movie. He had his grappling hook weapon. I mean, the only batarang he used was when he would take the symbol off his chest to use it to cut something. He didn't have batarangs. He had, he had minimal things.
Much to Craig's chagrin, no shark repellent.
Right,
Craig was very, very distraught about the lack of shark repellent.
Shark repellent, none of that. So, that was interesting how little gizmos he had. Yeah. Again, early in the game, gives you opportunity to keep, the character's presentation to keep evolving. How we'll see the bat costume change will be interesting. I mean, his cowl is, a hard leather helmet. Mm-hmm. Essentially, he's using, very minimalist body armor type stuff. He doesn't have the glider cape, You know, at one point we see him doing the Wind Rider
Yeah.
parachute outfit. Doesn't work out so well for him, so he's learning how to use that thing.
I thought it was great. I thought that moment was fun.
Yeah, again, he's learning.
Yeah, well, and not only that, but I think that was a good, and you and I had this conversation at our local comic book shop with another parishioner who I think was looking for things to be nitpicky about. That reminded us that, hey, this is a comic book movie. Like, you're supposed to have some suspension of disbelief in this, and that moment reminded you of it.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, this is rooted in some reality, but look, this dude just, like, fox squirreled off of a building and hit a pole. There's some absurdity to it. Remember that as you're watching this. So, and I thought that was excellent.
Of course.
What did you think about Selena? We've mentioned her several times.
I loved the representation of Selena.
Yeah.
I thought the actress did a great job. She looked great on film. Her fight choreography was completely believable. I mean, she looked great in her fight scenes.
Mm-hmm.
I liked her outfit was very reality based and gave you the feeling like that's going to evolve as well. You know, she's not evolved into what she really is yet, but the characterization of her felt very Selena Kyle to me.
Yeah,
Selena Kyle.
And a more Selena as we know her today, like a more modern like this is not Michelle Pfeiffer. From
zombie. Brought back to
and but I mean this is not somebody who's motivated by greed, which I think. In older Batman books, she was a cat thief. She was a cat burglar, right? But now, since like the 70s, we've got more of a more personified, like we understand her motivation better, where she's not just a villain. Obviously, and you see that with the relationship between her and Batman as it has grown. Like she takes on a different role. We're not sure what to make of her, and her motivations at all times. Like she's going to save the day. But she's going to steal some shit while she's doing it, right? Like,
well, and the character's been that way since its iteration. I mean, that's why the interest is so interesting about the relationship between her and Batman, because she's a nonviolent offender.
Yeah.
She steals from criminals. So it's like it's interesting to see Batman tolerate that to such a level in the Batman storyline.
Yeah.
I thought the representation of her was really well, but it also was like, I got the feeling watching the movie, like when she ultimately is ripping off the Penguin.
Yeah.
That was like, okay, so, you were working on a score here.
Yeah, 100.
So it gives you the feeling like, how long is she, she's got, it showed her closet and she's got all her grappling weapons in there. Like, okay, she's been doing this for a while. How long has she been a thief?
Well, she, like from the first moment where she comes down the fire escape, like she's so flexible, so feline-like.
Yeah, she's been doing this a while.
Yeah, she's honed her skills.
Yeah.
And I think that there's and maybe it's a 3-hour movie. There's a lot to miss on this, and I know you've seen it multiple times. I haven't. I was going to go yesterday, but snowstorm. Did her friend start working at the Iceberg Lounge because of the score, or did they meet there? Like, how did that happen?
They don't allude to that.
Okay, so part of me thinks that there's some guilt there because she placed her friend in that position.
Yeah.
As part of the score, and that's what motivates her. But I don't think, like you said, they don't say, and that's what's so. There is an ambiguity to her throughout this film that I thought was just really well played.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then you mentioned the Penguin. I thought this was this was an amazing version of the Penguin.
Oh yeah, Colin. I kept having to remind myself this is Colin Farrell.
Yeah.
He just killed it, man.
Wonderfully done.
Amazing.
I love that he's essentially middle management, trying to work his way up and claw his way to the top. Tweedledee and Tweedledum.
Yeah.
We got Tweedledee and Tweedledum in a fucking movie.
Yeah.
Who are those twins? Roger and I are going back and we're watching the Left Behind. Those twins are in the Left Behind too, and so like Roger looks at me and he's like, "Oh, aren't those the?" I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "Oh, I love this."
Yeah.
And he's like, "Who are they?" And I was like, "Oh, it's Tweedledee and Tweedledum." He's like, "Are you fucking for real?" And I was like, "Yep, 100%."
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed it, and I think we have to see more of him. I hope he is you said this is going to be a trilogy. I can't imagine he's not going to be a staple or a reoccurring character in some sense because he's not done.
It's going to, yeah. I mean, I'm laughing because the DCU, man.
Yeah.
They have been stumbling over their own feet for so long. Regardless, it's going to be interesting to see how and if this is rolled into the DCU moving forward.
Yeah, it feels detached.
It certainly does, but
yeah.
But that's the thing about the DCU. Everything's felt detached.
Yeah.
Unless it's actively put together, it feels completely detached.
That's fair. Yeah. No.
And even when it is put together, it feels like it's been shoehorned together. Is the way the DCU has acted since the Nolan trilogy ended.
Yeah.
So, I've not lost hope in the DCU. When this movie was announced, a lot of people were carrying such a Zack Snyder hangover, they couldn't get excited about it.
Right.
And I was the exact opposite. Nope. I'm like, oh, we're stepping out of the Zack Snyder, puddle and taking a fresh look at this. I was nothing but optimistic. And
it's a chance to move on.
Yeah. And it was, I've had to, I don't know how many people I've had to be like, look, I realize Zack Snyder touched you in the park, but this is not him. This is not him. This is not the bad touch that you experienced from Zack Snyder.
And you can't. That's not even limited to like a comic book fan thing. That's just kind of an everything fan thing.
Absolutely. And the same thing happened with Joel Schumacher.
Yeah. Well,
I had the same conversations when the Nolan movies came out.
I've had that same conversation with people who didn't like Tom King's Batman, and they're like, "I'm done with Batman." This is like, okay, but now James Tynan's writing it.
Yeah.
Did you read Marco Tamaki's
Batman? It's silly.
Have you read Brian Azzarello? Have you gone to the Black Label stuff?
Yeah.
Like, how can you be done? Number one, how can you be done with the character who makes up like 70% of what DC's output is in the comic book world, just because you didn't like one version of it? It's silly. So. We see a scene, and I'm not going to spoil it at the end of it, alluding to who the next bad guy might be. How did you feel about that?
I was laughing internally because I'm like, they just couldn't help themselves.
Yep.
I liked it.
It's red meat. It's red meat to the fan base.
I liked it. I really did. But it's funny because it's gotten to the point where if they didn't put that in, it would have been like this big gaping hole in the movie that would have stood out. So they're like, at this point, it feels like, okay, we've got to put this in there, or this movie's going to feel out of place and incomplete.
Yeah.
So I felt like I just thought it was really funny, and I cannot help but be excited about it because it's a character that I'm just going to go ahead and say it because we're spoiling everything else. The Joker makes a little cameo, and I'm excited about it because I am excited about every iteration of the character. I'm highly critical of the character's iterations because I am such a huge fan. So I'm excited to see what they do with this one as well. It's
big dick energy. It's like Dark Knight. Nolan's version of that, the second movie, is where you got that character, and if that's what they're going to do, if they're going to follow down that path, like I said, this is not a filmmaker or a film that's afraid to just look and say, hey, this is what I pulled this from. Like this was inspiring to me, and I think that might be what they're doing. And if you can pull that off, that's great. I would love to see some other characters, obviously, because we do get Batman's rogue gallery. You've got your mainstays, but there's so many other people there. I would like to see more. And if you're going to do what they like what they did in this film, where they show you multiple villains, and there's like I said, there are the mechanics of Gotham, different cogs in the wheel. You have different gears turning, each involving its own quote unquote villain. You can show me a whole lot of people. So I really hope we see that. Like,
who would you like to see?
I would love to see Killer Croc. And I don't know how a character like that fits into this world.
Oh, if Killer Croc would be like, to me, I think Killer Croc would be possibly the easiest villain to put in any of these movies as a secondary villain.
Okay.
Because Killer Croc is so simple. You don't have to spend any time on it.
No, his character is. I'm trying to figure out how to take like a mutant alligator man and make it feel at home with the very serious, very human nature of what these movies are, because these are not. There's not a lot of absurdism in this. So how would you do it without? And obviously, I think that they can, but you run the risk of making it, the lizard from the second Spider-Man movie, and that felt really comic booky, right? Like really.
Well, that's the thing with the killer. So if you want to take the super realistic route, super easy. You get a professional wrestler.
Yeah.
Give him a some kind of you just make up a grotesque skin disease. Bam, Killer Croc.
Yeah, would you be okay with something like that?
Oh, it'd be great.
Okay, cool.
Look at Lee Berhemo's representation of Killer Croc,
who is also his thumbprint's also all over this movie and the visuals.
Yeah. So, his thumbprint was all over Dark Knight too.
Yeah. Yep.
and Killer Croc is somebody you could just stick in, because Batman, the fights with Killer Croc are short.
Yeah.
Killer Croc's just a big dumb thug.
Yeah.
That's why he's so fun, is he's too dumb to realize that he's outclassed.
Yeah.
So you could have him as a secondary villain or a tertiary villain. Super easy. Just have a great scene where, because it would also be a short little representation of, okay, yeah, Batman also has to deal with these big dumbasses as part of dealing with doing these detective things and being smart and analytical, dealing with someone like the Riddler. He's also got to deal with this dumbass, that doesn't know any better.
And just wants to eat people.
That would just be super easy to throw in there.
I would also like to see Victor Zsasz. I think that would be a cool character to see. And as far as the serial killer angle goes, I think that would fit right at home.
I think that would be... that would fit in this story really well. But
I was actually kind of surprised that we didn't.
I think it'd be... As far as the representation of the Riddler, it'd feel like the Riddler Part 2. I don't think they're going to do that for that reason.
Yeah. Well, and I thought the same thing, because there's so much of the... So one of my favorite Batman stories of all time is Hush. And I feel like the Riddler, like Paul Dano's Riddler in this, was very hush. Where he even uses that word. Like, he tells Batman to hush at one point, and the way he looked, I was like, okay, like that's Hush. Like, that's the Riddler, but that's Hush. And so, I would love to see Hush come to life, but I think we just got a little bit of that in this, so I don't know that we're going to see that. So
I would love to see, of course, the Joker. I'm always up for that. That's a given. Bane is one of my favorites ever. I'd love to see
Bane get done correctly for once.
I'd like to see, I'd really like to see a South American lucha mask wearing Bane.
Yep. Smart person.
Yeah, I would love that. But if I'm talking about somebody I haven't seen yet, with the obvious asinine exception, I would love to see a very good Mr. Freeze.
Yeah, yep.
If we take the Mr. Freeze from the animated series,
oh god,
the representation, that kind of gravity, I would love to see that.
Yeah. So you said that Dark Knight remains your favorite. This is a very close second. This surpassed Dark Knight for me. Because for me, the strong point about Dark Knight was actually not the Batman parts of it. It was just Heath Ledger. Like, Heath Ledger made that movie to me.
Oh, absolutely, he stole that movie.
Yeah, there were moments of that movie that I actually don't like. But Heath Ledger just steals it and captured my heart. Mask of the Phantasm, and this may be cheating, but Mask of the Phantasm still remains my favorite Batman story of all time.
It's excellent.
So that's it. But this moved up as much as you can rank things, and as much as admittedly these things probably change every day. This comes up in a second as we're recording this.
I mean, if we're as far as live action movies go, Dark Knight's still number one. This is this couldn't be closer to a second. This might, it's so close it might even be a parallel 1A, 1B. If we include the animated movies, the animated Batman Year One is, okay, I think I have to say is my favorite.
Okay.
I think I have to say that.
I don't know that I've seen that.
Have you read Year One?
Yeah, I've read.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then it's the same.
Okay.
I mean, it's a straight up beat
by
beat adaptation, and that's hard for me to say because the Dark Knight Returns animated movie is, oh boy, I've rewatched that so many times. I love that story. But the live action, I still watching the car chase scene of Dark Knight in the theater was so good. I mean, it was like electrifying. It was so good. And I laughed out loud a couple of times because I was just so impressed. It's one of those things you're so impressed. It
just makes you get it. It reminds you of like being a kid watching really cool Saturday morning cartoons. It just
and the gravity, the way Heath Ledger portrayed the Joker, he just stole the entire movie.
Oh, 100%.
Christian Bale did a great job as Batman, but there's just Heath Ledger's delivery on that was just unmatched. It's just unmatched. Nope. But I look forward to someone giving it a try. I definitely do.
I'm not so hung up on what came before that it's going to, like, obviously it's big shoes to fit in, but you got to give things a chance for time to march on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So before we start talking about like the comics that we read this week, I want to look forward a little bit. One of the things that that does get some criticism, and I think rightly so, is that Batman just has such a footprint on everything as far as WB DC output. Like again, we're doing another Batman movie. We have another Batman trilogy. Batman's like 80% of the comics market for DC. Just out of like, what character, and because we talked about what villains you would like to see, is there a DC character that you would love to see get made into get some film time? We've seen most of the Justice League folks, but is there a and it can even be Batman derivative, but is there a character that you would like to see get some screen time instead of another Batman film?
Someone that hasn't at all, or
no, it could be that somebody that we've seen, somebody that we haven't seen, just somebody who's not Batman.
I mean, my mind is going to someone we've not seen at all. So
I'll go. So
yeah.
I would love to see. I would really love to see Martian Manhunter, like get a full cinematic, because we if you watch the Snyder remake or the director's cut or whatever, the Snyder cut of Justice League, you see Martian Manhunter. I would like, obviously not Snyder to do it, but because I don't trust Snyder with it, but I would actually love to see I would love to see Martian Manhunter get a cinematic presence and to tell a truly Martian Manhunter story. Without being just a retelling of the same white Martian, green Martian Holocaust narrative that we've seen before. I would like to see him get some screen time. And then, look, if you let me have Midnighter and Apollo, and I realize that's just Batman by another name, but dear God, I want that so bad.
Yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying. I mean, his appearance, but I disagree about the Batman by another name thing.
Oh, right. Midnighter. No, he's a total, like he'll kill. So, but he was always meant to be gay Batman. Like he was a Midnighter and Apollo were made, at the Wildstorm stuff. They were jokingly supposed to be gay Batman and gay Superman. Yeah, that was the tongue in cheekness of it all. So, like he's made from that mold.
Yeah. I mean, the DCU, man. All I can think is like the things I would want to see. Frankly, I don't think would do very well, but I would love a good question. Yeah, I would really love a good.
Now, do you want Vic Sage or Renee Montoya or either
Vic Sage?
Or?
Yeah, the original Vic Sage. But that's not going to be bombastic enough, right? To do really well. If we're being realistic. But that's the first one that comes to mind.
Okay. No, I think that would be really cool. I mean, I think it would have a limited audience, but I think for what it would be, taken seriously, I think it would be really, really good. Yeah. Especially, so when you said that, it made me think of 52, and where Renee Montoya becomes a question, which Vic Sage, the question, plays a role in that as well. But I would like to see that version of the character. Hell, I would like to see give me Plastic Man. That'd be fun.
Lobo.
Oh, dude. Dude, Lobo. Yeah. No.
Everybody'd be like, "Oh, this is a Deadpool ripoff." If you make a Lobo movie,
that's why you and I are working hell, because we're going to have to punch a lot of people.
Yeah.
So, well, all right. We both love the film. It's obvious. We would encourage everybody who's listening to this to go check it out. If you haven't yet, if you have seen it, go see it again. We're probably going to. Matt's already seen it multiple times. I would love to see it multiple times. So just really fun. And it's, look, there's a lot of great Batman out there. So even if you didn't, because there are some people that I've seen who didn't like this film. If you didn't, that's fine.
I can tell me why they didn't like it.
So for some people, it was the dark and grittiness of it. Some people, I think the length. I think if they had have made this film a little bit shorter, which by the way, to that end, the movie's 3 hours long. I felt like there were places they could have cut things out, but they didn't need to cut things out. Nothing felt like fluff to me, but there are things I think they could have shortened to make the movie, 30 minutes shorter. But I think the length of the movie really was too long for some people. And the different threads, the different directions that it went in,
everything can be criticized.
Right.
There's people out there I hear complaining about Dark Knight. There's people I hear complaining about Mad Max Fury Road. No,
we don't listen to those people.
I don't listen to any of these people that complain about. That it's meaningless to me.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. So that's why. But there's so much good Batman out there in comics and film or whatever. Like if this isn't your cup of, that's fine. Don't drag anybody else down. Just go read the Batman and read the comics and the characters that you enjoy, because it's pop culture. It's meant to. There's something out there for everybody at any given time. So, all right, let's talk about some comics. We got a little bit of time left. Walk me through something you read this week that you really enjoyed.
So this week, I'm going to talk about, from Marvel, the new #1 Punisher.
Interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm going to fasten my seatbelts for this because I'm curious to know what you thought about this.
So this is by Jason Aaron, Jesus Saez, and Paul Ezeka. Color artist is Dave Stewart. Corey Pettit did the letters. The King of Killers is the subtitle of this. Okay. Very aptly named. So what we learn in this first issue is there is a group calling themselves the Apostles that are accumulating weapons of destruction of all different kinds. Missiles, guns, drones, just everything you can think of. And they believe they're on some holy mission, what they're called the Blessed War.
Oh, so they're insane.
Yeah. And they are set upon by Frank Castle, who quickly comes in and kills the lights, and then everybody, except for one man who he leaves to question. And
they meet death.
Yep. He doesn't get an answer from the last standing survivor, so he does the obvious, what the Punisher does, kills him. Well, then, it's interesting, he's killing him with a sword. We're used to seeing Frank Castle operate with a gun.
Yeah.
And, he his first swipe with the guy, he doesn't cut his throat deep enough and doesn't kill him immediately. So Frank's like, still getting used to this thing. So he turns around and just good old-fashioned stabs him.
Oh, is this like a? So I know you said the other ones were the Apostles, and I think they're wearing like centurion helmets. Is this like a Greek? So I'm trying. Like I haven't read this yet. So is this like a Greek sword that he's like walking around hacking people with? Or?
Frank Castle.
Yeah.
Looks like your typical katana.
Okay, cool.
Sword. After he does so, the Hand shows up.
Oh, ninjas.
So the ninjas show up, and he commands them to destroy everything.
Wait. Back up. Frank Castle commands
the Hand to destroy everything on sight. So the next scene,
he's in charge of them.
He's going back to to a compound, a remote compound in the mountains, and he is greeted by the local leader, I guess you would say, of the Hand, and she greets him as their exalted one, basically. So as the story goes on, what we find out is when he's when he's initially greeted back at the compound, there's a room full of people that are bound and gagged on their hands and knees. She lets him know, well, these are all, murderers, child abusers that frankly aren't incarcerated for one reason or another, and the Hand has brought them to you, and we can kill them whenever you say go. And he says, no need. And he does it himself. He just executes these people with the sword one at a time instead of having others do it for him. Yeah. So King of Killers is on full display here. Yeah. This is a unpolished Frank Castle is a cold stone murderer setting. There's a flashback to where we see when the Hand sets upon Frank at one of his compounds in New York City, and ultimately we learn how he's recruited to this cause after he has killed a lot of ninjas. This woman who's kind of represents herself as somewhat the representative or somewhat leader. So basically she's like, okay, yeah, you've deemed yourself worthy of this cause, and tries to recruit him. As you can imagine, Frank Castle's initial reaction is, disinterest.
Yeah, yeah.
And she compels him apparently to do so because she presents him with what appears to be his wife. And we all know in the mythos of Frank Castle, Maria Castiglione was murdered in the park.
She been dead.
So what is up with this?
Oh, okay.
What has the hand done here? They have Maria Castle, as he changed his name to.
Yeah.
Live and in the flesh.
Well, they elected her.
So this particular issue ends where we flash back to him being at the hand compound. He has just freshly murdered all these people with this sword. Executed's a better word, maybe. And he's climbing into bed with who appears to be Maria Castle. And that is where the issue ends. So what?
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't read this obviously, but there's some things there where I'm just like, I don't know about if I like this or not.
Well, I don't. On its surface, taken at surface level, I don't like it.
Right.
But there's a lot to dig into here. There's a lot. First of all, I don't even know where to begin with this. But Maria Castle isn't going to be. She's not going to be a person who is going to want to lay down with a mass murderer.
No.
That Frank Castle is.
She would not like the person her husband became.
There's a lot going on here. There's a lot going on here. And they show her at the last page of this issue. They show her, and this appears to be the reanimated corpse of Maria Castle because she's got all the bullet wounds in her.
Well, the hand does that, right? Like that's why I said that they elected her.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, there's no pulling. There's no oh, this is a shapeshifter, or you know what I'm saying. I mean, this appears to be, but how Frank Castle can reconcile this and how there is a lot to unpack here moving forward. The setup, but essentially the setup is he has been baited to lead the hand because he now has his wife in his arms again. What does he not have? His children.
His kids, yeah.
So there's a lot here. There is a lot.
It just feels like, so it feels like, because when I think of Frank Castle is somebody who will definitely use a means to an end. Like he's always been that way, but he has this very rigid, staunch code, right? Like, it feels weird to me that he would sign up with the hand because it feels like in doing so he would break his code, his own personal code a little bit.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, there's a lot. Moving forward, there is a lot to unpack here.
All right, so who has Marvel left dead? Because like the Castle family was one of the few people. Like Gwen's back around.
Nobody's ever left dead in comics.
Yeah, nobody. Like less so now.
In the I should say no one in the big two.
Is Uncle Ben still dead? Like somebody check on him lately?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I can't say it. I haven't read it, so that's some interesting stuff. How does it? You being the connoisseur of the Castle, how does it compare? Like, obviously you don't know enough yet because you haven't read the whole thing. But having read a lot of Punisher, how does it feel in juxtaposition?
Weird.
Okay.
It feels very weird. A lot of weird stuff's been done with Frank Castle, though.
Yeah.
So I'm keeping an open mind with this.
Castle.
Yeah. The Avenging Angel Castle.
Yeah.
So I'm keeping an open mind with this. Jason Aaron writing it. He's written a lot of excellent Frank Castle stories. Yeah. So I'm compelled. I want to see where this is going. But it feels really strange for Frank Castle to be leading a team. Yeah. Regardless of what kind of team it is.
Well, I've seen Frank, I've had fun with Frank Castle on a team before.
Not me.
Thunderbolts. So I really like the Thunderbolts run. And also that reminds me, like that was back in the day, he was knocking boots with Elektra. Yeah. So I wonder if Elektra is going to come into this because they have a relationship history there. And she's got a relationship with the Hand. So that it seems like it might be something that you would expect to see her in. And she's prominent in Marvel right now. Yeah. Unless something's changed in the last couple of weeks. But so I enjoyed him as part of that, but it was always, okay, you're on the team, but we have to you're a hurricane that we just need to figure out how to point in the right direction. Yeah. But he always has needed somebody to point him in that direction.
No. Oh, you mean a part of a team?
As a part of the team.
Oh,
yeah. And that was, if you remember back to Civil War, they were some people were talking to Cap and they were like, yeah, we can use Frank Castle, and Cap was just like, absolutely not. Yeah. Absolutely, he is a mass murderer. We will
murdering trash is what he calls him.
Yeah, we will not do that. So he's always there's a use for him because he's a force of nature when he wants to be. If you point him in the right direction, it's something you want destroyed. He'll do it as long as it doesn't break his code. So I don't know. It's okay.
Is a good response to this whole setup. But the artwork, I mean, the story pacing's great. The artwork is great. Frank Castle has got the feel of the character and the way the dialect of the character feels very on point. He uses as little words as possible, basically. He's very cold and detached, man on a mission. He has very little humanity left. All that feels on point with the way the character interacts throughout the book. So that I really like.
Okay,
that's
cool.
That's represented.
Now the cover of this, and like this may not be the book that they did it in, so I may be skewing two things. But the cover of this has the old school Punisher skull on there. A while back there was a big like internet kerfluffle where people were mad that they were changing his skull or that they were taking away. Was that like I know that there was another book that they showed on the cover. He had this weird like demon-esque looking skull on his shirt. Is that still happening in this book, or is that just a separate thing?
So in this book, he has got, he's got a whole new appearance.
Okay.
And as a member of the Hand, this new logo represents that.
Oh, okay. Cool. So the new logo is in this book.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, he's, the Punisher skull represents Frank Castle. Right. One man doing one thing on his own. Well, in this book, he's been trained in using swords, and he's doing like what the Hand's MO is.
Yeah.
And, this new logo is a representation of his new position in this world. So, yeah.
Okay. That makes sense. Okay. Very cool. I just wasn't sure. Like I said, I know that made a big stink about that also because of how.
Yeah. I don't even know why we're talking about it.
Yeah. So I just didn't know if this, like I saw the cover and it was the old school logo. So I wondered if it was still showed up.
Yeah.
So, all right. Very cool. Well, you and I are going to be Marvel Bros this week because I am also, as you mentioned earlier, going to talk about a Marvel comic. And this is a one-shot. And it fits into this... it is a one-shot that fits into this crossover event. I don't know what you want to call it. That's called Devil's Reign that's spinning out of Chip Zdarsky and Marco Cicchetto's Daredevil run, which you're really loving.
Yep.
Like you are really enjoying it. And just as far as background goes, what kind of happens in that is the Kingpin, being the mayor of New York, outlaws vigilantism in New York and starts arresting all the heroes. Similar to Civil War on a smaller scale, more municipal code stuff, which I can just imagine how those conversations go. Somebody who works in municipal law. So that's happened, and as part of that, one of the characters, I think one of the first characters that gets arrested, is Moon Knight. And I remember you and I talking in the first issue. It's like, okay, how does Moon Knight get to be the one person who goes to jail, or the first person? Like, seems like that, like somebody else would have got caught first.
Yeah.
But there is a one shot from Marvel that came out this past week, which with a gorgeous cover by Rod Rice, I got to say, that explains that. It explains what happened, and it is called Devil's Reign, Moon Knight. It is written by Jed McKay, drawn gorgeously. I really had fun, like very, very cartoony style, but I really enjoyed it. Federico Sabatini, colored by Lee Luridge, with letters by VC Corey Pettit. So you ever heard of this little book that got turned into a movie called Watchmen? You ever heard of that?
I'm familiar. Yes.
There's a line in that where a masked figure looks at somebody and says, "Hey, you guys got to remember, I'm not stuck in here with you. You're stuck in here with me." That's a pretty good way to contextualize what happens in this book. Yep. I feel like there is a D-level villain that is hanging out. His name, he's known as 8-Ball, and he's got a new cellmate. And they're trapped in the Myrmidon, which is, high-level prison. There's like 5 high-level prisons in the Marvel Universe, the Raft, stuff like that. And so he's sitting there, and his new cellmate's like rocking out some push-ups, doing some yard work, staying swole. And he's just bragging on himself about how, who he is, what he does, how he's actually, a mastermind. And I'm just like, bro, this is 8-Ball. Like, zero people are concerned with you. And, just for humor's sake, it goes through to show you that, nobody's concerned about 8-Ball. This dude goes into the cafeteria, is trying to find a seat. He walks up to all these groups, the wrecking crew sitting there. He tries to sit with them. They're like, nah, son, like, go away. He goes up to the enforcers, and even Fancy Dan with his little pencil mustache, he's like, you're not sitting here, you nerd. Like, my man just can't find a place to sit. And, so he goes over and sits by a table later on. But this is the same guy that's been bragging to his new cellmate about who he is and all the clout that he has, just to really solidify that home. And he goes and sits by himself, and somebody walks up to him, and it's Captain Fusion, again, barely any more of a blip on the Marvel radar than 8-Ball would be. And he's just going to be a bully, right? He's just going to make this dude feel bad about who he is. But 8-Ball's new cellmate walks over there and kind of injects himself in the situation. And he's like, yeah, you're not going to do this. You need to fuck off. And he's like, who are you? And the cellmate just looks at him. His eyes kind of narrow. He's like, I'm the dude who carved that moon into your head. Because the whole time, Captain Shithead has had a crescent moon carved into his face. And it turns out in the new cell, he's Moon Knight. And this takes place, again, right after Moon Knight gets arrested. He gets sent to the Myrmidon. And he's a superhero. Like, he's responsible for putting half these dudes in jail and locking them up. And now he's in there with him. And you can imagine these guys are out for blood. They bribe guards. They find a way to get Moon Knight alone. In the showers, are just going to beat the pulp out of him. And it doesn't work out so well for him. Moon Knight is unimpressed by any of this. And he just proceeds to dispatch all of these dudes. Like, he breaks them. And part of why Moon Knight is not somebody who's doing this without a plan. What's been going on in the Myrmidon, you've got all these villains in one spot. You've also got heroes in one spot. Mr. Fantastic is also chilling in prison. There's all of these other vigilante heroes that have been locked up in there, but they're kind of minding their own business. In this prison scenario, inside the Myrmidon, there has been a fight club of sorts come up, and essentially combat by gladiators is being held for bets. And there's this one very large character. His name is Marco. Low level, again, another low level villain. We've seen him. I didn't look up where all we've seen him before, but very, very big dude, like very muscle bound individual. He's kind of the champion. And Moon Knight's fixing to take this dude's belt. So you get a little bit of like a wrestling vibe to it. And you're still wondering, like, what's going on here? Like, what's happening with this one-shot story? Moon Knight, after the shower scene where he's proceeded to dispatch all these guys, he tells the guard, who's shocked, he was like, yeah, you know what? I know what y'all are doing here. Why don't you go ahead and just let me be a part of that? I want Marco. And he's like, well, I can't give him to you right now. You got to earn it. And so Moon Knight goes through and he works his way up. He starts fighting all these dudes, whipping ass, and finally gets a shot at Marco. And you're just, through the whole thing, you're like, is my man just bored? Like could he just not take a nap? Like, what is he doing? As you know from the Moon Knight comic, if you're reading that, Moon Knight has set up his own office. He has set up the basically a heroes for hire kind of thing, not so much on the hire part. People who are in trouble, people who are scared, can come to his office, and they can plead their case to him and evoke his protection on this part of the neighborhood. And you see a flashback scene where a young woman, in fact, does that. And she comes to him and she says, I'm in danger. I made some mistakes. I don't know what to do. This man, I had a baby by him, and my daughter's 12, but he's a super powered person. And she's starting to show signs of that same abilities. And he's been out of our life for years, for all 12. He's never been a father to her. She doesn't know him, but now, because her powers are emerging and she's becoming like really strong and stuff, he's coming back into our life because he wants to use her. Like, he wants to use this kid as a pawn in his malevolent games. He sees her as a means to an end, and that's my baby. And she likes to color. She's just a kid. I don't want her brought into this. Can you help me? And Moon Knight says, you know what? Yeah, I can help you. Moon Knight sets up everything. I remember reading that first issue of Devil's Reign, and it's like, again, Moon Knight? Like why? He orchestrated it all. He got himself arrested so he could go get into prison, so he could walk into the Myrmidon, and he could find this girl's father, which happens to be the Mountain Marco, right? Like this big muscle-bound dude. And he does, like everything is, like these are like dominoes falling in a row that he has all set up, and he gets his chance. And like as soon as they get into the ring, He just lets him know, like, this is not happenstance why I'm here. You're my job. Like, you're my target. If you ever come near these people again, you will never see them again. Emphasis on that phrase. You will never see them again. And of course, Mountain Man Marco, he's just not having it. It's like, dude, I do what the fuck I want. Like, I'm fixing to break you. Even if you beat me, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go after them. I'm going to get them. Moon Knight's not having it. He drives his thumb. I'm going to spoil everything because it's a one shot. He drives his thumbs through Marco's eyes. You just hear screaming. And like I was reading this and like goosebumps popped up on my arms. I'm like that. Like, we've seen versions of that. Like, it reminded me of the Mountain in Game of Thrones. Where you see the Mountain do the same thing to a guy in the middle of the pit, or he just carves out the dude's eyes with his thumbs.
Well, before he crushes his head.
And then slams his head closed. But like, you just see that, and it's just like, oh, that's violent and brutal. And when you think about how violent and brutal it is in this kind of in Sabatini's manga-esque style, it makes it a little ridiculous because it's very cartoony. It's very something like it's he's got a manga-esque style, and then you just see this hyper-violent moment, and I'm just like, oh my god, and that's where the story ends. This was all a job, and it was really fun. I'm really glad. I almost didn't pick this up, but I was just because I'm not reading Devil's Reign. I didn't carry through with it. But I was like, it's Moon Knight. Let me see what's happening in this book. And also with the artwork, Sabatini uses a ton of Zipatone, and I'm a whore for Zipatone. Like, you give me Zipatone in the artwork, and I'm happy. Yeah. And so I absolutely loved it. The characterization, McKay just gets it. Like, he just gets this dude. It is brutal. It's just nasty.
I want to see more of this Mark Spector in the main title. Just the street level violent guy. Yeah,
because we're getting so much of this in the main title. It's all gearing up in this like secret cult of Honshu. And so we're not getting as much. Everything's like shrouded and it's not that. It's not this. So there's a version of this in there that I think we can get in that. And I'm with you. Yeah, give me more of that. But just for what this was, the fact that it's a job, this was cool.
Yeah.
So highly recommend it. Even if you're reading Moon Knight, you need to grab this. Even if you're not reading Devil's Reign, grab it. It's fun. And if you're reading both, great. If you're reading neither, hell, grab it anyway.
Yeah. Totally.
It's fun stuff. So. Man, that was fun.
Yeah,
a little long in the tooth here, but that's okay. What else we got to do, right? It's you want to talk about the Batman again? We can. Why don't we go ahead and land this plane? Unless you got anything else you want to throw in here or add?
No, we've been going long. I think we need to wrap it up.
Let's do it. So, as we always do, let's talk about a book that's going to come out next week and see what's going on. As in the meantime, while we do that, before we get to our next week's books. I'd like to remind you all that if you have enjoyed this show and the podcatcher, the platform, however you listen to this, if they have a rating and review, we would love for you guys to drop us a line, give us a couple stars, let us know how we're doing. Not only does it help us kind of guide ourselves and know what you're interested in, know what you're not interested in, but it also helps the algorithms. It bumps us up and gives us, it puts more eyes or ears on our quote-unquote product, so to speak. And not that we're doing this for any other reason, but we love to talk comics. We still love to talk comics, and we would like folks to listen to it. We take time out of our Sunday to do this, so, the more ears on it makes us feel better. It's totally just my own vanity speaking. But if you also like this, you can head over to our Facebook group where Southern Fried Geekery. Just type it in the search bar, will pop up, answer a few questions, come be part of the conversation. You can follow us on Instagram and Twitter. We post on Twitter, we post a lot of frames that we read, things that pop up in the comics we find interesting. And then the same on Twitter, or I should say the same on Instagram. We're showing what all we like. So come there. Come hang out with us. We would love for you to be a part of this little comic book community that we have. So, but in the meantime, new books come out Wednesday or Tuesday if you're a DC fan, as we are. So what's coming out this next week that you want to grab, Matt?
This looks really interesting. From DC, World's Finest.
Oh, yeah.
Batman and Superman by Mark Waid and Dan Mora. The World's Finest concept has always been really interesting to me. If Batman and Superman working together, if that's done loyally, the character, the aspects of the characters, that dynamic is fascinating to me. So I'm going to pick this up to see what this is all about.
Some really good stories in World's Finest history. I don't. That being said, I don't know how you're supposed to call yourself the World's Finest without Wonder Woman. So it's just because she deserves to be a part of that conversation. Because she is in fact the world's finest. Love some Diana. Trinity stories are the best. That's just me. So next week I'm going to go back to our newfound publisher that we've talked a lot about this past month, and that's Behemoth Comics. And issue 2 of this really surprisingly fun little book called Heavy Metal Drummer is coming out, and I'm stoked about this. It has that indie head shop feel that I think that Matt, you would really enjoy. It's the end of the world, and dude trades his drumsticks for an axe to hunt down these parasites that are taking over. And it's just fun. It's ridiculous. It's brutal.
Nice.
It's pretty in that kind of indie head comic kind of way. So. And go check out more of what they're doing over there at that publisher. They're, Vault's remind me a little bit of what Vault did when I first discovered Vault. Just really liking it. So, and in the meantime, unless you got anything else, you can just go forth and love you some comics.
Word.
And we will see you next time.